Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, protest across the nation and here in San Diego against President Trump's emergency declaration.
It's love, not hate. That's what makes America great is love, not hate. That's
what demonstrators are demanding from the Trump administration. Plus, relocating the homeless population in San Diego, the controversial temporary shelter. And a new drug is fueling the deadly opioid crisis, the rise of fentanyl across the nation. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebone Monet. San Diego activists rally at the San Diego County Administration Center to protest President Trump's national emergency declaration. KPBS border reporter Jean Guerrero explains why they're calling it a fake crisis.
It's love, not hate. That's what makes America great.
More than 100 people attended the rally, calling out the quote-unquote fake national emergency at the border, which Trump is using to fund his border wall. They brought attention to other crises they say are real, such as gun violence and climate change. Stephanie Cauchon is a bilingual special ed teacher in San Diego who says the real emergency is the way that the Trump administration is treating people of color.
I'm tired of watching my children, my students, cry because they think our government hates them.
We do have a crisis. That crisis is a moral crisis taking place and coming out from the White House.
Pedro Rios of the American Friends Service Committee says there is a humanitarian crisis at the border, but that Trump's national emergency declaration hinges on the idea that people are invading the U.S. He says that's an unfair characterization because most of the people coming are asylum seekers who shouldn't be kept out by a wall.
Government should be attending to the needs of migrants, especially those who are seeking asylum, and not try to create any sort of blockade, not try to prevent them from their legal right, especially when they're presenting themselves at the ports of entry.
Most of the people arriving at the border these days are families, and Rios says families are more likely to be seeking asylum than single adults. Last month, nearly 60% of all border apprehensions were migrants traveling in family units rather than as individuals, according to official government data. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
Homeless advocates are applauding a decision by San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer to use a city facility to temporarily keep people off the streets. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says the plan involves moving a shelter operated by Father Joe's Villages.
This temporary homeless shelter won't be here for much longer. Right here on Commercial Street, this lot is scheduled to be turned into affordable housing. And so starting in April, they're going to be moving people out of here and then temporarily to Golden Hall.
The plan is to use the second floor of the old convention center. There's a number of rooms that will soon be fitted with bunk beds. Father Joe's officials say all 150 people staying at its downtown shelter will be able to move into Golden Hall. The idea is to stay there for around 3 months. In the meantime, its tent shelter will be relocated.
It's a place for people to regain their sanity, regain their humanity.
Bob McElroy runs the Alpha Project tent shelter downtown and says he's glad the city is offering Golden Hall as a temporary solution.
We can't wait to build permanent sports. That's beautiful. That's one part of the big picture. That's not the whole picture. That's one part. But it's going to take billions and decades to build. So what do we do in the meantime?
Funding for both the Father Joe's tent shelter and the one run by the Alpha Project is set to end in June. But the San Diego Housing Commission is recommending keeping the shelters open past that.
Just for ours bridge shelter, there's 270 plus people that have already moved into housing, people going to school, people working every day. What are you going to go backwards? You're going to dump all those people back on the street? I mean, that's a no-brainer. I mean, that'd be just ultimate stupidity.
We decided. San Diego Padres general partner Peter Seidler and the Lucky Duck Foundation helped build the tent shelters, which people were originally opposed to.
The cost of doing nothing is huge.
Seidler wants more involvement from the private sector to help tackle homelessness.
And I think what we can do in the private community are a lot of things. We can help with the analysis and make sure that it's based in facts. We can push the politicians to do the right thing, to have the political will.
Father Joe says moving into the shelter at Golden Hall is just a temporary solution, and there hasn't been any discussion about using the location on a permanent basis. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
The San Diego County Sheriff confirms he will waive fees to produce officer misconduct reports. A new state law now makes them available. But KPBS reporter Taryn Minto says the department originally estimated the cost to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Sheriff Bill Gore told KPBS he will not charge for redacting records related to use of force instances or confirmed cases of sexual assault and dishonesty by a deputy. KPBS previously received estimates totaling nearly $400,000 to produce video, audio, and text documents for dozens of cases. Gore says he plans to hire more staff to help with redactions. He said he would like to upload records online once completed, but says he still needs to work out details with staff. The San Diego Union Tribune's Matt Hall first reported Gore's change of heart on Friday after a series of phone calls with the sheriff. Gore says after talking with Hall, he was concerned the large fees made it seem like the department had something to hide. He says that's not the case. Taryn Minto, KPBS News.
San Diego County health officials have issued an advisory warning doctors and parents to be on the lookout for Kawasaki disease. KPBS health reporter Susan Murphy tells us 16 children have been diagnosed with the potentially deadly disease since January.
Kawasaki disease generally affects children under the age of 5. Symptoms start with a fever and swollen lymph nodes in the neck.
And then everything turns red. Red rash, bloodshot eyes, red hands and feet.
Jane Burns is a professor of pediatrics at UC San Diego and heads the Kawasaki Disease Research Center with a multidisciplinary team, including climate scientists. KPBS talked to Burns during another recent cluster of cases in November.
If it's not treated, eventually it will go away over a period of weeks, but 1 in 4 children will be left with permanent, potentially devastating, fatal damage to their heart.
Burns says the disease is believed to be caused by unusual weather patterns influenced by climate change.
There are ideas that the increase in the surface ocean temperature may be increasing the intensity of trans-Pacific winds. And if those winds are carrying something that triggers Kawasaki disease, then yes, it's possible that climate change is related to the increased numbers of cases that we're seeing.
The changing ocean winds would explain why children living along the coast were once predominantly impacted. But Burns says the epicenter has spread eastward to places like Escondido, Vista, and Temecula.
The reason for the shift in our patient population to be more common now in the inland areas is a complete mystery.
She says children of all races and ethnicities have been impacted, but Asian children are at an increased risk.
And that's because there is a genetic predisposition to this disease, and Asian children are more likely to carry the correct genetic pattern to make them susceptible.
She started studying the disease 35 years ago after one of her patients died.
After the autopsy, we met with the family, and they brought in a paper bag of small bills that they had gone door to door collecting, and asked that I would do research on this disease.
She says progress is being made, but her search for answers continues. Approximately 6,000 children in the U.S. are diagnosed each year, but the number of cases in San Diego has doubled in the last 2 decades. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
U.S. Border and Customs agents here in San Diego intercept about 85% of fentanyl being smuggled into the U.S. So drug cartels are now moving east with their highly potent illegal product. Authorities in Arizona have noticed an uptick in fentanyl-related deaths.
People say all the time, hey, why would they make this drug that's so powerful if it's killing so many people? The reality is that they know that some of this is going to kill people, but for them it's an acceptable loss.
DEA agent Douglas Coleman describes the deadly impact of a drug nicknamed Mexican Oxy. Coleman says authorities have traced it back to Mexico, where the Sinaloa cartel is actively smuggling the illicit fentanyl into the southwestern U.S.
And the Mexican cartels have realized that we have this opiate addiction problem here in the United States, and so they're taking full advantage of that. They're mass producing quantities of heroin like we haven't seen in 25 years, and they're producing hundreds and hundreds of pounds of fentanyl and shipping it across the border, which is capable of killing millions of Americans.
CDC data shows synthetic opioids are linked to more overdose deaths than any other drug. The latest numbers from 2016 to 2017 show fentanyl-related fatalities accounted for some 28,000 of about 70,000 overdose deaths from all drugs combined. Part of the reason Mexican-produced fentanyl is so deadly is because the amount of fentanyl in these counterfeit pills can vary from almost none to a lethal dose of a single pill. In addition, most of the pills are labeled to appear as prescription oxycodone.
The reason that they're so involved in fentanyl is because we have so many people that are addicted to opioids in this country, and it's a venue for them to get into that market even more so than they did with the heroin. And remember, for fentanyl, it costs a couple of $1,000s to make enough drugs to make a couple of $1 million in profits.
The cartels are using their long-established drug trafficking routes in Arizona and California.
So if you need to hide a kilogram or 2 kilograms of fentanyl, it's really easy to hide that in an 18-wheeler and get it across, and the chances of you being detected are relatively small.
The so-called Mexican oxy is being seized in record numbers at ports of entry right here in San Diego. Authorities say this has led to a surge in attempts to smuggle fentanyl into the U.S. by way of Arizona.
So here's how the problem has grown with fentanyl. 4 years ago, we seized 0 fentanyl in Arizona. 0, not any. Last year, we seized hundreds of pounds of fentanyl powder and hundreds of thousands of tablets.
Prior to the national fentanyl crisis, it was heroin linked to the most drug overdose deaths in the U.S.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, our correspondent in Venezuela sits down with Juan Guaido, whom the U.S. recognizes as the country's president. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Facebook is no stranger to consumer and Capitol Hill backlash. From data breaches to congressional hearings, lately it's been an uphill battle for the company. KQED's Thuy Vu spoke to an author who believes the social media giant is a threat to democracy.
Joining me now is the author of Zucked, venture capitalist Roger McNamee. Nice to have you here.
Thuy, it's a pleasure.
You were an early advisor to Mark Zuckerberg and also later an investor. And you write about how in 2006 you advised him not to sell the company for $1 billion because you thought the company could achieve its mission much better by staying independent. What did you feel Facebook was back then?
I thought Mark had found the holy grail for creating a large network of people who wanted to interact with each other. He was the first social network to come along that required authenticated identity. MySpace and Friendster and the predecessors hadn't done that and had quickly been overrun by trolls. But with authenticated identity, I was convinced Mark would build a company as large as Google was at that time, and it would be...
You thought it could be a force for good.
Oh, totally a force for good.
And what about now? What do you think of Facebook now?
What basically happened was they discovered it was possible to build a network that connected the whole world. And I think that was Mark's goal at the beginning as well. But along the way, they discovered that if they got rid of authenticated identity as a requirement, if they relaxed all the privacy settings that they had in the early days, they would grow a lot faster. And at each step along the way, they compromised the safety of the people using the product in order to get to bigger and bigger growth and more profit. And in the end, the real miracle is that they got to 2 billion people on the network before we started to see the problems. I mean, it's a real tribute to how smart and clever they were.
But with the problems they're facing now, right, with data privacy, how they handle user data, in the example of Facebook, as the technology has evolved, it doesn't seem that Mark Zuckerberg seems willing to let go of the assumption that everyone will use and view Facebook the way he does.
Yeah.
So is it possible for him to solve the problems if he can't change his thinking along with the way the product has changed?
Thuy, this is exactly the issue. And it's not just Mark, it's not just Facebook. The thing I discovered, because I was so close to Facebook and I saw the issues first there, I thought originally it was just an issue being done to Facebook. What it really is something that affects all internet platforms that are based on advertising and attention. So Google and Instagram and YouTube and Twitter and Snapchat are all affected. But the challenge here is that success is a reinforcing thing, and after a while you think you know all the answers and other people don't. The mistakes that were made here, in my opinion, are forgivable. What I'm having trouble with is the resistance to change in the face of incontrovertible evidence. We know for certain that there are issues with public health, There are issues with democracy. There are issues with privacy. And there are issues with competition and innovation. And pretending otherwise is harmful not just to Facebook and to Google and Instagram and the rest. It's harmful to society and it's harmful to everybody.
So if these companies continue to be resistant, as you say, what is the solution here? Do you think they should be regulated? And if so, what should that regulation look like?
So, Twee, I think there's several areas we need to think about. One of the questions we need to ask right off the top is there are business practices that take place in our society that we have accepted without thought. One is that companies that collect our data are allowed to sell it to anybody they want or trade it to others, as Facebook would do. For example, why is it reasonable for people to collect our credit card transaction data and sell it to somebody else? I think we need to have a debate on that. Same thing for geolocation data from cell phones. Why is that legitimate? Why should it ever be legitimate to gather data on minors, people under 18? I was involved there from 2006 to 2009. The business model that created the problems didn't actually begin until many years after I left. And I'm really angry at myself that it took me all the way to 2016 to see the problems. And so it is from that self-criticism that I have taken up this mantle. I'm no longer an investor. I'm a full-time activist trying to essentially take my biography, my experience, and the platform I have to try to both raise awareness and help direct us to a good solution. But for some people, I'm not the right messenger, but hopefully I will help to get this issue in front of people and help them understand it, which is what I did with my book, Zucked.
And this is an industry-wide problem,
Absolutely.
as you've pointed out, but really a lot of the criticism has been leveled at Mark Zuckerberg because of the sheer power and reach of Facebook, right? But what about the role of Sheryl Sandberg? Because you were also instrumental in her hiring at Facebook. She had been offered a top executive position at the Washington Post. You said, no, why don't you consider Facebook instead? She took the Facebook position. And you say that really when it comes to the company's operations, Mark leaves the business side to her. How much responsibility does she bear for what has happened?
To be clear, they're the leaders of the company, so they bear a lot of responsibility. But the thing I want to make clear is that the managements of all of these companies began with an idealistic vision, right? In Google's case, to collect all the world's information. In the case of Facebook, to connect everybody. And that was not the problem. The issue was the business model creates all kinds of side effects that currently these companies don't pay the cost for. So it's a little bit like a digital chemical spill, right? And right now they're getting away without paying that cost, which they have to. I don't think changing management, whether you get rid of Mark and Sheryl at Facebook, whether you get rid of Larry and Sergey at Google, I do not think that's the answer. I think the answer is you have to change the business model, and it would be better if the existing founders did that because they're the ones with the moral authority to make those changes.
All right. Much more to come on this, I'm sure,
Twee,
in the
what
new
a pleasure.
Congress.
Thank you for having me.
A pleasure to talk to you. Roger McNamee, author of Zucked. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
It was a rainy weekend in San Diego, and parts of the county even saw snow. This is video taken in Julian. Residents from all over traveled there this weekend, hoping to get some snow time before spring arrives. San Diego is under a frost advisory, and more rain is on the way. Let's go now to meteorologist Erin Calandra for tonight's forecast.
Good evening. I hope you had a nice day today. Our weather, well, it's kind of chilly. Temperatures are certainly below average. And because of that, we do have some weather alerts out there for tonight. We have concerns for frost. There's a frost advisory from Riverside all the way down to Alpine, places in between. And that means if you have any kind of plants you want to protect, bring them indoors or wrap them up. This is going to be overnight tonight and also again on Tuesday between 10 p.m. and 9 a.m. Temperatures, they are really just going to drop. As far as precipitation, not much going on here in Southern California right now. That's going to change midweek. We're going to see rain and even snow. So taking a look at the metro area tonight, 42 degrees. That's chilly, below average. In Ramona, we're talking 28. In Mount Laguna, down to 21 degrees. It's because we have this big dip in the jet stream. It's called a trough. It's leaving us wide open for this chilly air to come blasting down from the north. And it's not just us, it's everyone here in the Southwest. We're dealing with abnormally cold temperatures. So for tomorrow, it's going to be nice and sunny, but the high in San Diego only 59 degrees. In Ramona, will reach 55, and Borrego Springs sitting at 62. And that's going to be the trend this week. Here we are midweek, still a big trough sitting on top of us with chillier air. We actually expect to see a storm moving in Wednesday through Friday with some showers and then some periods of rain. About a ½ inch of rain will drop along the coast and the interior areas. We could see about a ½ to 1 inch of rain, again, mid to late week. Temperatures will rebound by the weekend. We'll be back up into the 60s. Now for the mountains, we're going to see snow measurable. Big Bear, 4 to 5 inches of snow. Parts of Mount Laguna seeing about 8 to 12 inches of snow. Again, that's toward the end of the week, and it will be drier by the weekend with sunshine. And in the desert, spotty showers around Thursday and Friday, drier and warmer by Saturday, with some sunshine at 63 degrees. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Back to you.
A tech startup, Deep Space Industries, has created synthetic asteroid dirt. In tonight's SciTech report, producer Luke Groskin explains why space agencies are buying it up.
Make asteroid dirt for a living.
Dr. Stephen Covey works for Deep Space Industries, a tech startup whose mission is to make commercial space exploration possible.
We're standing inside of Deep Space Industries' Florida lab, where we actually manufacture asteroid dirt.
Known scientifically as regolith.
It's really the surface covering of an asteroid.
But not just any asteroids.
We're making asteroid simulants of the asteroids which we believe are the most valuable, that have basically water and volatiles in them. If you take water and CO2, you can make rocket fuels. You can also make methane and plastics.
And with the remaining metals, you can make structures. Now, how do they know that all this good stuff is inside the asteroids?
We don't really know. We haven't been on an asteroid yet, but we can get pretty good guess because we have meteorites all around us, and we can study the meteorites, and we can make simulants that are much cheaper than meteorites and in much larger quantities, but they have the same minerals which we think are the most common ones on asteroids.
Common minerals such as olivine, pyrite, and magnetite make up the core of their mixture.
We work with the University of Central Florida, and they basically come up with a mineralogical recipe that says this is what you need to work toward.
Armed with all these ingredients, it's time to blend them together.
What we are doing is quite closely akin to cooking. We take raw minerals and we crush them into a powder of an appropriate size. After we crush it, we measure out appropriate proportions of all of the different minerals that go into it.
Now add water and stir.
We use a large industrial mixer to mix it into a mud pie, a paste.
What you do next with this mud pie depends on what type of asteroid you want to simulate.
For some kinds of asteroids which have clays in them that bind things together, we just take that, stick it into a drying room, and what comes out is then a hard cake of asteroid regolith. The other kind of asteroid, the ones that don't have clays in them, we have to bind them together with something else. We use something called water glass, sodium metasilicate. When we mix that into our mixture and we microwave it
for an entire hour,
it turns it into a hard rock. Then we run it through a high-speed flail to turn it into dirt again that we think replicates what we would find on an asteroid.
Sometimes finding the right ingredients is a little too difficult.
One of the most common kinds of asteroids is basically more than half cronzitite. That is not common on the Earth, so no one mines it.
So Deep Space Industries makes it themselves.
We put it in this big pressure cooker. For every 100 kilograms of phaolite, we add about 40-45 kilograms of water, seal up the pressure cooker, and then heat it up to 410 Fahrenheit for a week. And then we open up, and out comes cronzitite. And it's more than half of some asteroids. We can make asteroids that are as soft as charcoal or as hard as concrete. And we make the full range because different kinds of asteroids are different strengths.
With their simulants formed, Deep Space Industries delivers them by the bucketful to eager researchers.
We've already shipped to NASA approximately 100 buckets of regolith, and we've sold to other space agencies, other countries.
As more missions to investigate asteroids are planned, Deep Space Industries keeps cooking up simulants to meet the demand. After all, success depends on their accuracy.
The Japanese tried to bring back samples of Itokawa. They brought back a lot of valuable stuff, but their sampling mechanism failed. If they had had good simulants to try against, then maybe the sampling mechanism would have been designed a little bit differently and would have succeeded.
Ultimately, Dr. Covey believes that the simulants will yield more than just pay dirt. They are the first step in making space mining a reality.
Computers used to be science fiction. Cameras used to be science fiction. I think it's inevitable, but we are confident that it's the wave of the future.
For Science Friday, I'm Luke Groskin.
Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, Sammy Davis Jr. made a name for himself in showbiz. A new documentary about his life and career debuts tomorrow night at 9 here on KPBS. And on Midday Edition, an award-winning novelist who weaves African culture into science fiction and fantasy stories visits San Diego. We'll have a preview of the Writers' Symposium by the Sea tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.